Welcome to The Outlet, an NBA podcast hosted by Nick Fay and Kory Waldron.
On this episode, Kory and I are joined by Jac Manuell to discuss the NBA return. As always, you can find The Outlet on all streaming platforms. Enjoy the show. All right, fellas, we got the news. The NBA will be back in 2020. December 22nd, we have the NBA returning. We got Jac dancing in the background. Kory, how are you feeling? You didn't hit us with a dance, but I know you're happy about it.
46 days. That's how far away we are. 46 days. We're going to go through the NBA draft, free agency, training camp, and then basketball. 72 games, condensed. I know LeBron James probably isn't too happy, but this is where we are, and it's going to be a quick turnaround. As we already, we kind of knew it was going to be a quick turnaround. I remember, when we first got announced late December, we were all like, "Oh shit!" Then it was January 18th. We were like, "Hopefully it's January 18th." But no, we're gonna have Christmas Day basketball, which is always good. I do enjoy Christmas Day basketball, but again, a lot's going to happen now in basically a month and a half.
Yeah, I don't know what's crazier, the start of the season or how close free agency will be to the draft and training camp, because I heard this point brought up by Bobby Marks and Brian Windhorst, free agents aren't even going to be fully signed by the time training camp starts. Because, if you figure free agency starts November 20th, 21st, whatever it might be, it usually takes at least 2 weeks for free agency to sign most of the guys, and then you always have the guys that maybe linger for a month. It really sucks for the restricted free agents, which we already talked about, because they're usually the guys trying to be patient, and that's not really an option this year.
Well, and another layer to that would be the fact there's not going to be a lot of chemistry for any of these guys switching teams. If they do switch teams, obviously some guys might go back to who they're with. But if you're switching teams, a lot of time to get chemistry going, which I think that's going to be obviously not a jam-packed superstar free agency class by any means, but it still matters.
Though.
Yeah, it still matters though.
I thought I saw a great point by our guy on Twitter, Gotham Reckoning, saying how it's going to be pretty terrible for rookies because they're going to be drafted. They're going to not have any of those summer camps or all those extra time they can get in. They're not going to have summer league, not going to be able to work out with the vets during the summer. And they're just going to have training camp, and then they're going to be in the NBA action because it doesn't look like there's going to be any preseason either. And if there is, it'll be super shortened.
Yeah, at the end of the day, guys, I'm wearing green because money talks. Extra $500 million, whatever it is. At the end of the day, LeBron James, he might have the facepalm emoji when it comes to his Instagram story, seeing, the shortened seasons or whatever. But I'm actually surprised in some regard because LeBron has so much say in the league. And I've spoken about that on JBT in the past a couple episodes ago. So to sort of see this where it's just no, LeBron, Danny Green, you guys, the Lakers and LeBron, you don't run the league. There are also 29 other teams who haven't played, and 15 other teams, 14, 15 other teams haven't played basketball in 9 months. These guys need basketball back. The owners need basketball back. Money, at the end of the day, is what drives this conversation. And I think it's better for everyone involved, for the large majority of people involved. And, I'm excited about it. I'm going to be off on holidays. I'm going to be able to immerse myself in the NBA season. It's going to be absolutely wild for the content. I feel like, there's going to be podcasts aplenty on the OTG network, and it's just going to be getting our head around it. I feel like I'm still getting my head around it, reading all the proposals and the play-in tournaments and all these sort of things, the travel restrictions and requirements. And there are certain things daily testing still happening. Yeah. I feel like this is, and I'm going to probably chat about it in detail as well on JBT, the real test comes now. The bubble was something, and the execution of that was nigh on flawless. But now you have a 72-game regular season plus playoffs. You have travel. You have everything else to deal with. People living their normal lives now in a country where the pandemic is still raging. It's going to be
maybe
a challenge.
Worse than ever, to be honest.
Literally, the last couple of days, I think it's the highest ever cases. So the challenge starts now for Adam Silver and the rest of the NBA.
Especially when you think about the fact, like you mentioned, there's been 100,000 new cases a day right now going on. They've also talked about having fans at these games to some sort of capacity in certain areas. And, you look at the NFL, for example, and I know, was it the 49ers? Or I know there's, no, maybe not the 49ers. I know there's teams that are still getting COVID positive. So
the
you
Packers
think about,
and Niners just tested COVID positive this week. They both closed their facilities, and they ended up having to play a game last night, even though neither team was able to practice. They played the game. Anybody who tested positive or came in close contact couldn't play. Didn't really impact the Packers a ton. The 49ers are missing 4 to 7 players that were good players on their team.
Right.
And then today, 2 Packer players tested positive for COVID, and one of them played in the game. So now you don't even know what this means for next week or how it's going to have an impact. Obviously, it's a little bit better for the NBA in terms of flexibility with scheduling, because the NFL, they only play on Sundays or Mondays or Thursdays, and it's only one game a week. But still, it's going to be a problem. And like you said, you guys, the home market thing, I think, is going to be a big factor, because guys are going to be living their normal life. And as much as you can practice good habits, all it takes is your delivery guy to not practice a good habit, bring you some food, and now you have COVID.
Yeah. I mean, it's problematic, especially because, 72 games. It's still a lot of games in terms of travel, the fans at whatever, capacity they're going to be there. Trying to manage it will be extremely difficult. And I hope, the NBA does the best to, keep everybody safe. But I think if you're trying to model what the season should look like, do not do what the NFL does. And I don't even know how you can stay away from what the NFL does in terms of precautionary stuff. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on as we move towards, the NBA season.
Yeah, it only took the NFL 5 weeks to realize they should be doing game day testing, but we'll save that for another podcast.
One thing I wanted to ask you guys, I guess, is that the worst case scenario? You guys have a greater knowledge of the NFL and Major League Baseball and the like. Is that we know what the best case scenario looks like, but obviously we know what the best case scenario looks like in Orlando, in a bubble where there's daily testing and you're restricting the social capacities of hundreds and hundreds of people. Is the worst case scenario what's happening in the NFL right now? Because from what I know from the news that I get on ESPN or whatever, the league's still going on, and while there's testing and all this sort of stuff happening and cases and positives, it still seems to be at least running. It's not running at its best capacity. Do you think the NBA is in a better spot? What's the worst case scenario that could happen, K-Wall?
Well, I think the one benefit to the NBA is their staff and players on the rosters is so much smaller than that of MLB and the NFL. The NFL, obviously there's 50 plus players and then coaches and personnel. So you're dealing with a lot more people and a lot more chance of something going wrong. And same thing with baseball. Whereas I think because the NBA is, a little bit shorter in terms of roster and personnel, it's a little bit more manageable. And I think even if you're, keeping some personnel not near players just to try and minimize, I think that's possible. I think that's a better outcome for the NBA because, the difference in size, I think, is matters. I think it's almost double if you're thinking about comparison of the NBA to the NFL in terms of staff.
Yeah, it's substantially more. They just have so many more coaches, so much more equipment to manage and things along those lines. Like you said, Kory, roster's 53. They have their practice squad this year for extra players because of COVID. So now you're just talking almost 100 people, really, for an NFL team. Where in the NBA, they have party of 30 in the bubble. Obviously, they could have more now. But I'd say in terms of that, it's easier that they have less people. But in terms of if an NBA player gets COVID and he plays a basketball game, I have a hard time seeing not everybody on the court getting COVID. Right. You know what I mean? Given the proximity, how close they are. I know in the NFL, they're still very close, but they are wearing, helmets, and, a wide receiver might never make contact with a defensive lineman or something. You know what I mean? Where in the NBA, a point guard's going to make contact with a center trying to get over a screen or something like that. And they're literally exchanging sweat. When you're brushing on somebody, you're feeling water on you from them. I would say worst case scenario would be worse than what we've seen for the NFL and for MLB. I remember when baseball first started back up, a lot of us talked about it. We thought it was going to be shut down. At one point, it felt like that was going to be what was going to happen. And the NFL, it never really felt to that point. And it could happen with the NBA. But if the worst case for them is what's happened to the NFL, to be honest, it's not terrible. It's not great. It's not ideal. But you'd still probably get through the season and you'd feel comfortable naming a championship and feeling that person was actually the champion.
The one thing I could say, just thinking about the MLB, I remember the Marlins and the Phillies, for example, they had to play a shit ton of games in a condensed schedule because of how long they were testing positive. So I would say that would be one, that's an issue that the NFL doesn't have to deal with, as you mentioned, Nick, because they only play once every Sunday, once every Monday. Whereas in the NBA, that could be a real issue if all of these games get postponed or canceled. Then all of a sudden you got a week of 7 days, you got to play 5 games or something. Some horrific.
That's where the injuries come in.
Right, exactly. And
because you already have the quick turnaround.
That's where you're going to be the most worried about that type of situation coming about.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some things that worry you, but we got, like Jack said, you get a lot of credit to Adam Silver and the NBA and Chris Paul and what they did in the bubble. I'm sure they're going to come with a good plan. If I have more confidence in their plan than I did with baseball or with the NFL, because the NFL had the longest time to prepare and they probably did the worst job. So the NBA, short turnaround, had the experience of the bubble, and they also have a great commissioner and some great leadership with Chris Paul and some of the other players too. Yeah,
positive tests are going to happen.
Yep.
It's fait accompli because of the nature and the spread of this virus, the viral nature of it in many cities across the United States. So the preparation is going to be what is going to happen after that. What is going to happen to games and what are the plans A, B, C, D, E, F, and G when that does happen. We obviously, that wasn't when you're playing in the same venue for days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks on end. You don't have to change anything. But now you're talking about 30 different regional cities, maybe 29 because Toronto obviously are going to be playing wherever they're going to be playing. That's another question. One comparison point I will make, and this is for Aussie listeners and AFL fans out there, the AFL had to shut down the season after round 1, and they came back and played 20 rounds of AFL football in regional bubbles. Now, that idea has gone to the wayside a little bit, but I'm wondering if they're going to take ideas of that in terms of how they put the scheduling together. And I honestly do think, and we've heard a lot about it, it's like, you play your 3-game series against the Lakers straight away. But it's weird because, wouldn't you play your home and away against them? And then there's the travel aspect involved with that. I think there's a lot of things to work out. And like I said, this is where the difficulty really does come in. And this is where Adam Silver is probably going to face his toughest challenge, other than the whole debacle with the Los Angeles Clippers and Donald Sterling. This is where the challenge really starts to happen for them. And, it can be done. There are other sports across the league that I'm sure, he's looking at, looking at what's happening with the English Premier League as well. Obviously, there's no fans in locations, and, maybe there's more fans allowed at places where the bubble is less spread, or maybe the nature of the stadium is that it's more open. And you got the luxury fans up in this. To me, I'm just intrigued to see, because they came up with this 200-page booklet for the players and all the people going there. Man, it's going to have to be an encyclopedia for this 72-game season that we got ahead of us.
I think scheduling is going to be huge. You need to make it so if you go to California, you're playing the Lakers, you're playing the Clippers, you're playing Golden State, you're playing Sacramento. You know what I mean? You try to make it make as much sense as possible. Even when you're coming to New York, make sure you play the Knicks, make sure you play the Nets. Philly and Boston aren't too far away. Really, scheduling, I think, is going to be one of the biggest factors to try to limit, wasted travel time, which you see a lot during the NBA season, because your team might go on a freaking trip to Indiana and then, they might be back there again in 2 weeks. If you can get that doubleheader or, get those 2 games out of the way, yeah, it's not ideal to play the same team twice on the schedule, but it's 2020, 2021. It's going to be a weird season again.
Now, I have a question for you guys. I'm not sure if I missed it or if it's been said. The 72 games, are they still trying to fit that into, the end of December all the way through the end of April, beginning of May? Are we still trying to have the NBA season end? I know they said the Summer Olympics they want to have this upcoming year. So is the plan still to be done with everything by the end of June?
That's it. I think it's July-ish. I think that they pushed it back maybe a month or something. I know Nick's probably looking it up right now, but like you mentioned, Kory, I think the Olympics is not necessarily something that they care about for the players or whatever. It's because they don't want to compete with another sort of brand for ratings and for attention, like they did with the NFL, like they've done with the MLB, and like they've done with the politics and the media surrounding that. The attention, they want to have the sole focus. That's why we're seeing the 72 games to appease the TV partners as well. I just think that everything that is being done is, while rushed, it's at least thought out. Nick, do you have, I guess, confirmation on that?
By early July.
Okay.
So obviously with the finals and playoffs, the time is going to fluctuate a week or two, but early July, which is pretty normal, to be honest, because the season usually ends early June. So you're just really pushing it a month.
It's normal in the sense of when it ends, but it's abnormal in the amount of games that we're going to see being played, because again, we're losing November, the end of October, which, again, we just got done with Halloween. This is normally the first weekend really of the playoffs, or not the playoffs, the regular season, that is. And we're losing, basically 2 months of when the season would be. So that means there's going to be a lot of back-to-backs, I would imagine, then.
Yeah, I mean, you're losing the month and a half, but you're also losing 10 games off the schedule, which does help. And then You know what I mean? So it's going to definitely be a little bit more condensed, but I don't think it'll be extreme, especially because they're going to early July because the season, and they'll probably erase some of that wasted time. You know what I mean? During the playoffs or whatever, they're just going to try to push things in and not accommodate everybody. And then we know for All-Star break, it might just be a week off for players instead of actually having the All-Star week. And I don't think that's been confirmed yet, but that's what the likely scenario is.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. You're not going to have a large gathering for just like one game, and it's just dumb. And I didn't to do that.
It could literally ruin the season for an All-Star event.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. They'll probably still announce it, because content and for purposes of contracts and the rest of it. The question I wanted to bring to you guys is I chatted to Nick Busek about this when these rumors were starting to heat up a couple of weeks ago. Kory and Nick, I'll go to you first, I guess, Kory. The rest versus rust debate. Who do you think this benefits more in terms of overall the start of the season? I said to my guy Nick Busek on JBT that this rapid start to the season could almost benefit Miami and Lakers at the start. Maybe not the Lakers, but Miami, because they're probably in the gym right now as we're speaking. They're probably in the gym the next day. Pat Riley's probably taking their skin folds. But obviously the rest for teams like Golden State, for teams like the Brooklyn, who are said to be championship contenders, they're rest, but they're not going to be in the best of form. Obviously, with guys as well coming back from serious long-term injuries in Clay and KD and Kyrie and stuff. What are your thoughts, I guess, on the rest versus rust debate heading into the? Oh man, I hate saying this. The 2020-2021 regular season.
I mean, I would say that the teams that had deep playoff runs, it's going to be more problematic. And maybe not for Miami, as you mentioned, because Miami, a lot more younger guys. Jimmy Butler, he was in the gym the day after the NBA Finals ended. But you look at the Lakers and you see LeBron James, it doesn't benefit him at this point because he's played so many games, and you're raising the risk of something happening. And Anthony Davis, again, not the most durable guy over the course of his career, so that's also problematic. And again, during the NBA Finals, there were a couple of games where he could barely walk up the court because his ankle. So I think it's problematic for teams that are a little bit older. But the Brooklyn Nets, I think that's a team that obviously has been waiting for an opportunity. Kyrie and Durant have been training camp, or not training camp, but training and practicing. And the team that didn't make the bubble, I think they're going to be obviously well rested. I think it's more concerning for the teams that are older, like a team like the Clippers, right? You can't load manage really, or maybe you could, but again, it doesn't feel like you can, especially after how last season ended. So I think it's for certain teams it's just more problematic, but I'm not really expecting much rust, if any, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, it's really tough to say. I would say the rust type of thing, like the training camp is short and there's no mini camps. You're not getting as much time in, the practice facility unless you're already there. This is where I think if you have those off-season runs with your teammates, obviously it's not real NBA basketball, but that's where you could kind of get some chemistry, especially for guys like KD, who's never played with his new teammates. You know what I mean? He's only played with them and, Kyrie and some of these off-court games that don't really matter. So I could see it going both ways, but like Kory said, I think the biggest concern would be injuries for the older teams that just logged a lot of playoff minutes only a month ago. You know what I mean? For LeBron, having an idea of what his offseason schedule is like in terms of rest and recovery and then getting into training, he's not going to be able to do his regular regimen. It's going to be something different. He's going to have to adapt, and that could lead to some problems. So I kind of avoided your question, Jack. I don't know which way I'm leaning. I think kind of what Kory said, it really varies for each team and each circumstance, and also some stuff that we can't see because we just don't have access to it.
Give me 2 or 3 teams that benefit from it most and benefit from it least. There can be teams that we've already talked about. For me, I've said that I think it benefits Golden State and Brooklyn for various reasons, but you could also make an argument that a rapid 72-game season, there's going to be injury risk for Kyrie and KD. I just personally think that those guys, I also think it benefits a Milwaukee because I think that they're going to be hungry. I think Giannis is probably working out in Greece right now. He's probably bought 4 gyms out there. But in saying that, I just think that teams that are on the precipice of championship contention are going to benefit. Teams that are resting or whatever and maybe on the come up, in Atlanta or Chicago, maybe those teams will certainly benefit. They're hungry. They want to be playing basketball. Zach LaVine, Trae Young, these guys are hooping like crazy. Kory, do you have any teams? How will your Indiana Pacers fare? Is there any sort of benefit or negative to this rapid return of the season for maybe if you were to retain a Victor Oladipo? TJ Warren was balling out. Do you think he continues that form? What are you thinking from the Pacers side of things and I guess other teams?
I think I think the Pacers are in that bunch of teams that probably aren't overly affected because they played basketball not too long ago, so they're probably still in decent shape, but you just have to ramp up your effort over the course of the next month and a half. And like a team like the Warriors, I think it definitely benefits the Warriors. And I think it doesn't I'm not worried about the Nets. My concern about the Nets is just will they have enough time to get the chemistry going? Because it's still a juggling act of get Durant and Kyrie Irving on the same page and figuring out how to work Karis LeVert in. So I think that's the issue with them. But it's not I'm not worried about injuries for either one of those guys personally. I think it's more so just getting the chemistry up to par for a shortened season and a rush when you're trying to make a statement, obviously in year one. And Victor Oladipo, because I know you brought up his name. I think it almost kind of benefits him because he was a little rusty in the bubble. Because then I know he's been working out in the gym, so it actually might benefit him because he had a small window to feel some NBA action, went back to the gym, and now can maybe be better prepped for the next season. So I think those three teams, that would be my thoughts on them. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think if you look at any team that was in the bubble or the postseason that didn't have a long run, but they still recently played basketball and they played good basketball, it could benefit them because it's a short window and you see some of the mistakes you made. The Phoenix Suns come to mind. I could see them being able to build off that confidence because it's so fresh. Where 4 months between seasons, it's hard to carry that momentum. But really, it was only a few months ago, and that was the best taste they had winning. So yeah. I could see that benefiting them. Obviously Golden State and Brooklyn, from a rest perspective, those guys should be good to go. There's still going to be some load management for them because anytime you come back from a major injury, they're going to monitor you and make sure that you're not, overexerting yourself. So really, to me, the thing that really sticks out and I feel the most confident saying is the teams like Miami, the team like LA, like the Lakers, even the Clippers. You look at even Boston, you look at Denver. Yep. Yeah, these teams that are making the deepish playoff runs or played a basketball, they could have fatigue. They could need this time off to fix that ankle sprain that's been taking a month to heal, and they haven't been training. They're the guys that actually deserve to have that extra month to take off that they're just not going to get because they're just not going to be afforded that window.
So another thought just came to mind by you saying that, Nick. How does the teams that saw a coaching change play into this, right? A Billy Donovan and the Chicago Bulls, a Doc Rivers and the Philadelphia 76ers. How does that play in the effect of a team? Steve Nash and the Brooklyn Nets. I'm sorry.
I think the Houston Rockets maybe would be the biggest one because they're probably changing styles. Where you're looking at other teams, like you said, with the Nets, they're going to have a whole bunch of shit changing from KD to Kyrie to whoever they bring in. They got new coaches. That's on them. They better get their ass in the gym now. Don't wait till December 1st.
The buzz never changed.
God, I'm one of the teams that had a coaching change.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacers, but at least the Pacers still have a majority of the same players, and I don't think their scheme's going to drastically change. It's really the teams that the drastic change is going to be huge because learning a new system in the NBA is hard. It's not as hard as learning a new NFL system, but there's still plays and stuff that you're just not going to have time to do. And I'd say this about the young teams that changed coaches. It's going to be interesting because they were given, I believe, some extra practice time in their facilities over this last month, whatever they had. But still, these guys haven't played in a long time, and they can't rely on their basketball IQ like a team like the Lakers can because they're over 30 and they have all the experience where they can win some games just being smart. These, a team like the Knicks, a team like the Hawks, they're just not that experienced, and they could be extremely rusty.
Yeah. OKC still don't have a coach.
That was literally my next point. It was what's OKC going to do? They don't even have a coach yet.
Dude, they better hire a coach by the 18th. I mean, usually your coach doesn't pick your pick, but they have some say or hey, this is a guy I really love in my scheme.
It almost feels like... Oh, go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to say, funnily enough, the hot rumor is that Troy Weaver, who is a coach within the NBL and has been a coach and has been with the Brooklyn Nets in certain iterations as well. He coached
He was the G League Coach of the Year, I believe, at one point.
Team. I think he'd be a great hire. But yeah, you're sort of asking a guy to say, all right, you got a month, figure this out. Chris Paul's gone, Dylan Gallinari's gone. Figure this out now. He better be whoever takes on the OKC job better get an extra year on that deal or an extra $500,000 because man, that is not a job I want to be walking into. Just all right, man. It's like when you, as a teacher, you walk into a classroom as a CRT, as a substitute teacher, and it's just all right, we've got this kid who's got ADHD. We've got this kid who is incredibly violent. You got to figure it out. You got 45 minutes before you go and teach them maths and literacy and trigonometry or whatever. That's just my head would explode if I were Troy Weaver or whoever's going in there.
And it's going to be the holiday season, which is just automatically stressful for most people. Because it just comes with other family drama or holiday shopping, whatever it is. Like, it's crazy. I would assume the players anticipated this to some extent. Like, they had to have a better idea of this happening than we did. But still, like, this is really like, hey, get your ass ready. Like, I'm not playing basketball, and I'm already feeling that way.
And there's also a pandemic. Like,
yeah, just throw that in there. COVID-19, worst pandemic we've probably ever seen since the plague. Like,
And not to get political, there's also there's an election going on in which, it's just going to cause more chaos because of how everything's playing out. So it's
you could just say it, Kory, because one of the candidates doesn't want to leave the White House, even though they're going to lose, and they're going to try to do everything in their power to create chaos in the United States while you're trying to launch an NBA season. And it could have an impact on the COVID-19 front, which we didn't even really talk about, given how the government plays a huge factor in, human safety.
Yeah.
And I think
nuts.
It's crazy. And I think in also saying that, there's also the players that, and everyone, or us included, that are wanting to maintain the loudness and the Black Lives Matter movement and the voices there. Like, does that lose steam now? Because I remember hearing, I can't remember what platform said this, but Adam Silver was just like, yeah, we'll probably go back a little bit more to normal because we saw the bubble. Without the bubble, we might not see what's happening in your country right now because of the incredible efforts that were being done by teams, the players especially. I think that LeBron James leading at the head of that with his More Than a Vote campaign, and so many other players, the Milwaukee Bucks doing what they did. Nick and I had a really good, thorough discussion about that on last week's JBT. I just think that needs to be maintained because human rights and societal injustices are more important than a game of basketball. And while I'm pretty sure that a large majority of the owners don't care because half of them, in an ESPN piece are just like behind the scenes saying, yeah, well, we're kind of hiding our donations to Donald Trump right now because of the tax stuff. And it's just like, man, like, there's just some things that make me frustrated. But yeah, you're taking in all of those things and putting it into, it's like, all right, you guys going to play 73 games of basketball right now. And and I don't think the world has been more unstable, or at least in your country right now, than what it is right now. And that affects just like, when you go to your job and you're sort of just like got so much shit on your mind, it's just like, man, I got to deal with this, I got to deal with that, I got what's going on at home, I got this pandemic.
Hard to focus.
I wonder and I hope, I know all of us are big advocates for mental health campaigns and mental health advocacy. I hope that the NBA is like allowing, because I think that every team was allowed at least a psychologist or a therapist or whatever in the bubble. I hope that is being increased, if not maintained.
I think that was a mandated thing the league added a year or two ago where you have to have one of those options. And before I lose this, in terms of the players going and striking the bubble, they had a direct impact on what happened in the election.
Yes.
We saw the tweets out there and all of the different arenas that opened up voting. And a lot of them were in places that were swing states that were going to suffer voter suppression. So shout out to the NBA and actually having an impact where a lot of people said it was stupid or it doesn't matter. Well, it actually did, and it could probably change how things are going to be moving forward in the United States. So props to them before we lose that thought.
Absolutely. I think we could do a whole podcast about how amazing and analyzing. I quote tweeted on the OTG Twitter about the polling facilities that had opened up and provided access. Atlanta, like you said, a swing state. My guy Paul Rudd was out there. Hey, who would have thought? He was handing out damn cookies to people at mine and Nick's place of worship. You couldn't get a greater human being than Paul Rudd doing his thing there.
Cookies look pretty good too.
They looked all right, yeah. I mean,
hey, you're getting a free cookie waiting in line, which you shouldn't even have to do in the first place. But again, something we could say for another podcast. But
absolutely. But yeah, it's chaos, man. It's chaos. But sometimes some people, you either sink or you swim, and some people thrive in the chaos. Some people don't. There's so much being asked of our players and everyone within the NBA right now. I hope that this provides a semblance of stability for them financially and everyone, and as well for just the people out there that are going through so much beyond the pandemic, just fans of sport. And hopefully this is providing some sense of escapism. I know for us, when just talking about hoops on a podcast and watching a game of basketball is a good outlet for us, pardon my pun. But it is in a currently just absolutely chaotic state of the world. Talking about hoops is a bit of fun with your friends and watching a game of basketball, whatever it is. I hope that this is more good for people than it is bad, including the players and fans and people beyond.
Yeah.
And I guess a quick note, guys, on in terms of the draft being on the 18th and free agency being 2 days after, and then training camp being on December 1st, that expedites the process of trades. You know what I mean? If you're going to make a move, if you're bringing in a Drew Holiday, a Bradley Beal, or one of these big names that has been mentioned, you have to almost get them in before December 1st so they can have ample time to learn your system and learn their teammates. So it feels like everything has to be sped up to an extent.
Not to mention, it feels like, like someone could get traded on like Thanksgiving Day. I mean, like that's just how the window is. Like the window is really going to play out where it's going to be draft, free agency, Thanksgiving, and then a few days, Black Friday, training camp. Like that week is going to be the most unreal week I can remember. And like, at least for us in terms of like,
I heard some NBA teams are going to have some crazy Black Friday sales.
I was waiting for someone to do that, man. The first pun of many. If we get like at least,
we're gonna be like pure in the holidays, like
wild. It's so this is the stuff where it's like crazy, but in a good way. Like there's so much to analyze that you can't do it in a 30-45 minute podcast, but. God damn, man. Just
2 weeks away. Wait, the crazy part is it's 2 weeks away from right now that we're talking about. We're talking about 2 weeks from now in which all of this is going to be taking place.
Just a quick shout out to us. We do have our restricted free agents and unrestricted free agents already done on Apple, on YouTube, on the OTG website. We got written, we got video, we got audio, whatever you want. We'll be dropping a ton of free agency content, as much as we possibly can before the day actually comes. So keep an eye out for that. Obviously, not as much as we typically do because of the time restraints, but it should still be plenty of content.
Yeah.
Any other stuff you guys want to touch on, Kory?
Well, there's also plenty of draft content as well that just came out for OTGbasketball.com as well. Definitely check that out if you're trying to get up to speed before the draft. That is, again, in less than 2 weeks.
Yep.
Videos, articles, podcasts, literally every single form of content is on OTGbasketball.com. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, OTGbasketball.com, at OTGbasketball on Twitter. There is too much content almost. But look, I'm not complaining. Because I enjoy it, and everyone out there should be damn checking it out because it is worth your time.
Always a pleasure, fellas. And like Jack said, you can find us on all those streaming platforms.
Peace out, knuckleheads.